Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Clinton Presidential Center's Kumpuris Distinguished Lecture Series. Tonight, we are here for a very special evening that is the result of a unique partnership. The President is Missing marks the first time a president has collaborated with a best-selling author on a work of fiction. This powerful, one-of-a-kind thriller is filled with details only a president could know, and the kind of suspense only James Patterson can deliver. Tonight's program is made possible because of a generous gift from the Kumpuris family, who established this lecture series in honor of their parents, Dr. Frank Kumpuris and Kula Kumpuris. A very special thank you to our other partners as well, the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton School of Public Service. Dean Skip Rutherford is here, and you'll hear from him later in the program, and AT&T Arkansas. Moderating tonight's conversation is a proud Arkansan, Academy Award winner, philanthropist, and a local restaurateur, Mary Steenburgen. Yes, give her a round of applause. Mary has appeared in more than 60 films, including her newest film, Book Club, which I can't wait to see, which was recently released. We are so fortunate that Mary and her husband, Ted Danson, are back in Arkansas to be part of this very special program. James Patterson is quite simply the world's best-selling author. He currently holds the Guinness World Record for the most #1 New York Times bestsellers. Additionally, he is an incredibly generous philanthropist who established the James Patterson Teacher Education Scholarships in the College of Education at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. Since its inception in 2013, James and Sue Patterson, who is also here with us this evening, have provided 73 scholarships to students who are studying in the College of Education to become classroom teachers. He also holds an honorary degree from the University of Arkansas. And it is always a great pleasure for me to introduce my boss of 27 years, President Bill Clinton. President Clinton, yes, we'll all give him a round of applause. President Clinton is the ultimate bibliophile who devours books, usually reading about a half a dozen at a time. We are so grateful that 20 years ago, he decided to build his presidential center here in Little Rock so that our community has access to one-of-a-kind educational and cultural opportunities like tonight's program that just wouldn't be possible without it being here. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the stage Mary Steenburgen, James Patterson, and President Bill Clinton.
Don't stop. Don't stop.
Thank you.
Wow. I am so excited to be here tonight with the two of you and with all of you in my beloved home state of Arkansas. And I'm glad that the little thunderstorm this afternoon didn't keep anybody away, but you would have known we were two sad Californians when we literally went, "What was that? What was that?" It's been so long since we've heard thunder. James, you are one of the most extraordinarily gifted and prolific writers of modern fiction, and you're just a master at making people's pulse race. And I also appreciate the many wonderful female characters that populate your books. And on a very personal level, I'd like to congratulate you on one of your more recent books,
I know somebody in the audience is going to like this.
Yes, that you wrote with your wife, Susan. And it's called Big Words for Little Geniuses. And it's fantastic, and I can testify to its effectiveness because the day after I read it to my two oldest granddaughters, the 4-year-old called her older sister, the 6-year-old, a nincompoop. So there you go.
Is that word in there? I don't know about that
word's
one.
definitely in there. They had not heard that before. And Bill, I know what a fan you are of the thriller genre, and specifically of Mr. Patterson. For many years you've talked about him, and so I was so excited when you got the opportunity to do this, and I'm a big believer in trying new things as you go through life, and you're definitely a newbie at fiction. So I was excited for you that you got to do this, and the results are just spectacular. I also wanted to say on a personal level, I really appreciated this afternoon our Frank talk that we had. He's my buddy of over 40 years, and we talked about things that are meaningful to me and about the last week, and it just meant a lot to me that you were so kind of self-examining and able to go through the last week in a way that was very much about trying to get things right. And I appreciate that. So, as we get started into this, I do have a warning for everybody who has not yet read this book.
We're boring.
They're so boring, but that's not the warning. No, the warning is that you must not start this book late in the day. Just trust me on this. Unless you're on maybe a transatlantic flight, or you're a speed reader, or you're just an incurable insomniac and you want to just give up the night, because you will not want to put it down. It is a fantastic roller coaster ride. And my poor husband was on the plane when I was reading it, and he had to listen to me going, oh my God, oh this. And so as soon as I finished it, he read it.
Sounds like something out of the book club.
Yeah.
No, never mind.
Are you plugging my film, James Patterson? How lovely.
Oh my God, oh my God.
So I believe the two of you have a mutual agent or friend that kind of conceived of this idea. So who was bold enough to make the first move?
Well, first of all, thank you. Secondly, the real reason we asked you to do it is so we could flack your movie. I mean, who'd have thought somebody starring in a movie called The Book Club would be doing this interview? No, congratulations. And thanks for saying that an old dog can learn a new trick. Mary, as all of you know, has had a great second career as a songwriter, among others. But here's Bob Barnett, for years, is a Washington lawyer, has been our agent, our lawyer, our friend. So he calls me one day, I don't know, back in 2016, fairly early, like the middle of 2016, and says, you know, I've been trying to get you for years to write a mystery. And you devour them in great quantities. I want you to do it. But you're not going to do it, are you? I said, look, Bob, I got to do all this foundation work. It's hard work. I got to raise the money for it every year. Got to do it. He said, I know. So why don't you do one with James Patterson? And I laughed. I said, he'd never do that. I mean, why should he do that? He's the best-selling author in the world, and, you know, it'd be like You've seen that Bob De Niro movie, that Robert De Niro movie where he becomes an intern in his late 60s? That's the way I felt, it's like so he talked to Jim and we set about doing it.
And Bob came to me, and from my point of view, we both grew up in small towns. Mine was in upstate New York, and nobody famous ever came to our town, except when I was 8 or 9 years old, President Eisenhower came. There was a little parade, and I never got closer than 300 or 400 feet, but I never forgot seeing President Eisenhower. So the idea, and I never forgot where I came from. I never forgot coming from a small town. I never got a big head about stuff. So the idea of spending a year with President Clinton and writing a book with him, to me, was irresistible, depending on how it was when we got together and talked about the book. And that could have been a deal breaker, but it wasn't.
Wow. And did it take about a year? Is that how long it took?
Yeah, at least a year. Yeah, maybe a little bit, maybe a little longer in terms of, it took us a couple of months to get started.
We began talking about it, I don't know, sometime in the early fall or late summer of 2016. So we talked about in general what it ought to be about, and in general how to do it. Then he said we got to do an outline. We did that. Then once you have a skeleton, you have to put flesh on the bones, and we did that. And along the way, when we did it, I said this thing has got to be real in two ways. First of all, I want it to be factually accurate. How old-fashioned is that? And I want it to be factually accurate, but I said, you have to help me here because you'll figure out how to make this interesting, and I'll just bore people with my policy wonkism. You can make it interesting, but we got to make it not only accurate, but the problem has to be something that could happen. So he said, okay, I will, but you're going to have to answer a lot of questions. So next thing I know, I get my first test. I get 20 questions that I have to answer in great detail to enable the strategy that we decided to execute together to go forward.
Yeah, one of the tricks or one of the problems that we had to solve was, can you write a page turner, a summer beach book, and also have it be kind of important about things? And one of the keys to that, and I think what separates this book from anything I've read, and I don't know, Mary's opinion, because she read it a little while ago, is how authoritative it is. The president disappears in the book. If it happened, and it's improbable, but it can happen, but if it happened, this is how it could happen. There is a plot against the United States that would be devastating, and it is accurate. If it happened, this is how it could happen. There is an attack on the presidential motorcade. If it happened, this is how it could happen. And that's what separates this from a lot of thrillers, because trust me, I've thrown a lot of malarkey around, but there's no malarkey in this book.
Maybe we should, for those of you, I'm sure most of you know what it's about, but for those of you who don't, and I'm going to try to be as careful as I can not to create any spoilers here, but you guys did come to a discussion about the book. The book centers around a potential massive cyber attack called Dark Ages, the results of which would be catastrophic. And everything that happens within 5 days and requires, at one point, that the President of the United States secretly has to leave the grounds of the White House, as he is literally the only person that can stop this cyber attack. Now, the character of President Jonathan Duncan is both heroic and flawed, and sometimes he sounds a little bit like you, and sometimes he sounded a little bit like John McCain, the background of John McCain and others. And I just wonder, what were your goals in the construct of the character, both of you, for the character of President Duncan?
I wanted a president who was strong, persistent, determined, straightforward, and who put himself in an interesting position. You know, the book opens with all this swirling speculation about whether he should be impeached. But I didn't pattern it on what happened to me, because this guy says in the book, it'll be interesting for you to read, I think, you know, if I did what the other party thinks I did, I should be impeached and removed. I didn't, but they think I did. And they think I did because I haven't been able to tell them what really happened. And I haven't told them what really happened because I don't trust them not to make it public. And if I make it public, then the problem I'm trying to avoid will probably happen, and happen faster. And you mentioned John McCain, who's, as you know very ill. We fought like cats and dogs, but we worked together to normalize relations with Vietnam. We worked together to end the slaughter in Bosnia. We worked together to prevent ethnic cleansing in Kosovo. He was absolutely willing on every given day to work with somebody in the other party if the country's interests depended on it. And that's worth a lot, and that's what we're losing. And that's one of the things that you will see in this whole novel. A lot of our novel is triggered by the crazy things it does to your mind when you don't think you can trust anybody who's not already with you. And so that's an interesting thing. That's how we did it. But he's a good president.
It is not a political book. I'm not a Democrat. And we got along very well and all the way through it. But one of the things that we want to do, one of the serious things, is to draw attention. You know, for 30 years in this country, Saturday Night Live, Veep, Scandal, House of Cards, we've been making fun of president, and that's a healthy thing to do. But it also, people start to get it in their heads that that's what it's really like to be president, and that's a dangerous thing. And what we wanted to do was to remind people of how important this job is, how stressful it is, how dangerous it is, how vital it is to nations all around the world. And I think that's what we had in mind when we were creating this character, just to remind people, so that when you go to vote, you're going to do the midterms. This is important stuff. This is really important stuff. And once again, it's not a political thing. You all figure out who you want to vote for, but just remember how important those jobs are.
Yeah, there's no mention of political parties. I don't think the words Republicans or Democrats are ever in the book that I remember.
We did that on purpose because you can tell where on some issues he's more liberal than his adversaries in the Congress, and some issues where he's not. But the main thing is, we want people to think that it matters who gets to be president, it matters who works with the president, it matters how decisions are made. There are, people here who had a lot to do with my presidency, Secretary Slater and Bruce Lindsay and Stephanie, who likes to tell people she worked for me more than half her life, which makes it, the implication is that I violated the child labor laws when she was hired. But it matters whether, you're trying to figure out what you should do, how do you do the right thing, and you worry more about that and its impact on the American people than what's in the daily news cycle. Because once you start worrying more about what things look like than how things are, you're on a slippery slope. You can never ignore how things look, but you can't be controlled by it. Because if you do, you can get in terrible trouble. And so there's a lot of stuff in here about that. And what we try to do is to say below that, here's what's really going on, and here's what it looks like. And there's a lot of, if you look at all these political shows, you see that. But as Jim said, one of the things that I think they may have inadvertently, even the ones I like, made Americans more cynical because most of them aren't too realistic. I mean, I don't know of any president who's killed anybody for political reasons now, and all this other stuff that goes on. I don't. The most realistic political show on television, I think, is Madam Secretary. And it's the most like the way things actually happen. But Jim's right. I think and I love the others, by the way. I mean, I like Shonda Rhimes, I love Scandal, I like all that stuff, but really. So this one, a lot of this stuff is right down the line, and the problem could occur.
Well, speaking of the reality of being president, you're removed in many ways when you're in the White House from the realities that the rest of us, in some ways, the world lives with. And it is necessary for President Duncan at one point to drive a car for the first time in many years. And I'd like to read a little excerpt from this part. I haven't opened my own car door for a decade. Behind the wheel, I feel like someone fresh out of a time machine, transported into the future by this mysterious contraption. I adjust the seat, turn the ignition, gun the gas once, throw it into reverse, and turn my head to look back, my arm over the passenger seat. As I slowly back out of this space, the car emits a beep that grows more urgent. I hit the brakes and see a woman walking behind the car on the way to hers. Once she is passed, the beeping stops. Some kind of radar, an anti-collision device. I look back at the dashboard and notice a backup camera. So I can drive in reverse while facing forward, watching the screen. So, Bill, FYI, in case you ever do drive a car, most of us do a little combination of the old looking around and looking at the screen, but having been driven by you only in a golf cart, I'm going to say that
I'm
maybe,
there.
Yeah, just
I'm
stick
there.
with the fiction.
I'm telling. Well,
Yeah.
when we were going to write it, I asked the president. I said, "When was the last time you drove a car?" And he has a couple stories. But subsequently, I have been in a golf cart with him twice when he's driving, and it is a hair-raising
It's
experience.
terrifying. Terrifying. I think you think you were a great driver, but I think you were like 16 the last time, those memories.
No, well, I mean, look, when I was...
Don't try to defend yourself.
No, look. When I was here as governor, it was a strategy. I mean, how in the heck could I have gotten elected 5 times except by voters who wanted to keep me out from behind the wheel? And it worked like a charm. I won 5 terms, so I thought, no, really, it is frustrating. I taught Chelsea to drive when she was 16 at Camp David because we were on the compound. It's 2 square miles, give or take, everything confined. I drove my Mustang at the Charlotte Speedway in 1995 at a big national Mustang convention. I bought my Uncle Raymond's 1924 Buick a couple years after I got out of the White House. Added to an antique car catalog and auction. And it's up at the Rockefeller Museum of Antiques Automobiles here now. But otherwise, I haven't driven, and it is it's terrifying when you do it. And so that was really, we were joking about it when we were doing this little section, because if you haven't driven in 15 years, you can't believe all that beeping that keeps you from killing somebody.
And on some level, the president also talked about how exhilarating it would be to be on the loose for the first time in a long time.
Well, did you have fun exploring ideas about what life would be like outside that presidential bubble? Because what happens when he goes kind of AWOL, he's out there with the rest of us.
Well, I particularly liked, I used to think about what it would be like if I just had a day off and I could wander around and nobody really knew who I was. And it would be like I was 28 or something again, just wandering around. And we actually spent quite a bit of time working on the 2 or 3 real world incidents that we talk about in some detail in the book, just because it was fun, just trying to capture for you by explaining how thrilled he was by these encounters, what the reverse is like, knowing that every day you got to stay in a box. But I can tell you that the president, we believe, and I did a lot of work on this actually beyond my own experience, if you were going to go missing, you could do it. It's hard to do and it wouldn't last long because the Secret Service swears to protect you and they don't think they could do a very good job if they don't know where the heck you are. And I believe that the threat we chose to talk about, cybersecurity, is the only credible one which could lead the president in this case responsibly to go missing. And if you read the book, you'll see why. But it was fun to write about, but by and large, it's not a good idea. There's a reason the Secret Service is there. There's a reason we haven't lost the president since President Kennedy. And thank God President Reagan survived, and it just...
In the book, the president in the book gets to go to a baseball game, and he's a big baseball fan. So that's sort of exciting. I think he has a hot dog there. That's sort of exciting. But what happens in the baseball park turns out to be rather dangerous. So
it's totally a thrill ride. James, in writing this book with him, you were writing a book about the presidency in many ways with one of a very small club of people that could talk about this. Were there surprises and insights that you wouldn't have expected?
Well, once again, it struck me just how important the job is, and I really got a real feeling for that, and the way I don't think you could unless you spent that much time with somebody. I think the biggest thing, I don't mean to embarrass the president, is just I had a really good feeling about him before I started this, but it was drilled into me how this man has devoted his life to trying to do the right thing for people across this country. And continues to do that. I've had now a lot of experience with the foundation, and it's just unbelievable the number of things they've done and what he's done. I mean, his second career is astonishing. What he's done with the foundation after the presidency.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, we also appreciate the generosity that you and your wife have shown to the University of Arkansas and for literacy and educational programs. But now he is a newbie at this, so were there times that you guys were on the phone and he suggested something and you privately kind of rolled your eyes and thought, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard? And you can...
No.
Never? Oh my gosh.
No. There were no... My theory on getting together and starting a project with somebody or a group of people, and I wish Congress could do this, is mutual respect and then listen. And that's pretty much what we did.
I like it.
I'll give you. But one of the reasons we got along is that we played close attention to each other. So I got to the point where I could see what he was doing to keep this thing going. And I used to joke with him, I would say, it's been 20 pages since we killed anybody. I mean, we were, but I was paying attention, and things would slow down, and all of a sudden we'd talk about how they were slowing down, because if you do a book about cybersecurity, if you understand it, it's much more scary than most military encounters, but it's not, you're not popping somebody off every other page. So I watched how he'd go back over the same thing that we'd already rewritten 5 times and pick one thing and it take a U-turn, and all of a sudden people go, oh my God, he's a genius at that. So I paid attention to that.
I did tell the president we can't go 300 pages before something happens.
Yeah, but I'll give you an example. But so the reason we didn't have an argument is he understood that one of the things that I wanted to convey, because I think it's generally important and specifically important here, is that you don't get to quit being president on everything else, even if there's an emergency. I mean, maybe you can do it for 5 or 6 or 7 hours, but basically there's things you have to sign off on. So we were going to try to deal with one of these Medicaid waivers in the healthcare landscape, and which we, I think, wound up mentioning a little bit, but it was just, it took too much space to explain what was at stake. So, you know, the 15 of us who are policy wonks and love that stuff, I found it thrilling. But it would, you know, we'd lose a lot of people. And I didn't want to lose, I want people to understand this is a serious problem. And everything that happens could happen. We have our defense budget $639 billion, right? And our reported cybersecurity budget is $15 billion. And there are, as Senator Pryor's nodding his head, there are certain secret accounts permitted by law to be, in effect, unspecified, which might double that. But it's still more or less than 5% of the defense budget, and yet it could be as much as 50 to 80% of our real headaches in the future. So I just want you all to think about that. That's my only political objective here. I want people, without regard to their party or philosophy, to say, hey, take another look at this, and don't you think we need to be first in the world at this? If we started the internet revolution in Silicon Valley, how come Israel has gotten 50% of the private capital invested in private security in the entire world in several of the last 5 years?
You know, Mary, you started out by saying, you know, did the president ever say anything that made me roll my eyes or stupid? And he really didn't. But on the other hand, I mean, with editors, I frequently am rolling my eyes. And in Hollywood, my dealings, I am constantly rolling my eyes. I mean, I swear to God, I don't know how you and Ted Danson have ever put up with, I mean, obviously there's some people out there that are brilliant, but some of the stuff you hear, sometimes I get on these phone calls, I do these, like the 9th time we're going to go over the first 10 pages of the script, and I just have to kind of quietly hang up. I just can't stand it. I mean, it's just like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, seriously, I mean, have you ever done a film? Do you know how to write a script? Who is making these statements? So, no, but I could see where you might think that there's a lot of stupid things being said out there, because I'm sure you've heard a lot of them.
I just like teasing Bill. That's the other part. But actually, speaking of Hollywood, one of the things about this book is that it feels very cinematic. I don't know if that's something that's just built into your writing, as so many things that you've written are right for movies. But this is, and especially as an actor, the way you constructed characters. The characters are very whole and real, and they have quirks and unusual twists, and we find out why they're the way they are. Everybody has a background. I really appreciated that. Was that fun constructing these characters and talking? There is, without spoiling anything, and because you find this out right away, there's an assassin, a female assassin who listens to classical music, and just the nuances of what she listens to and why and all those sorts of things. I just thought it was brilliant.
Well, one of the things in terms of ways that the president made this a much better book is just keep pushing to make these characters flesh and blood. The president, that's an obvious one, but the assassin, not so obvious. And in the first couple of drafts, the assassin was kind of a typical thriller character that you live with it, but you don't. And the president kept pushing to make this character more and more flesh and blood.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think it makes it more interesting. And second, I think it makes the country more secure when people see their adversaries as people. I'll give you, we set up the first counterterrorism operation and the first cybersecurity operation in the White House on a comprehensive basis. And I kept pushing for information about Osama bin Laden. I thought he was fascinating because he was from the richest family in Saudi Arabia. He had liked America when we were trying to help them beat the Russians in Afghanistan. And he had kidney trouble, and he was still willing to live in a cave and throw it all to the winds to kill as many of us as possible. So I thought we'd be better off understanding him than not. And I still believe that. So the work we did on this assassin, one of the things that most surprised me among our reviews have been uncommonly kind and generous, and I think we both appreciate it. But one very serious reviewer actually just flat out said, this is assassin character. This is just not believable. Now, I'm unaware of how many assassins she knows, but, and I don't mean this to be a put down. I don't mean it like that, but you look around this audience tonight, and you scratch any of us long enough, there's still a person down there somewhere, right? And so I give Jim the credit for filling in the blanks, but I told him, I said, we need to do something with this assassin because there were people like that in the Balkan Wars. Year after year after year of people being slaughtered and raped and mauled and abused and having their loved ones killed in the cruelest possible way. It twists people in funny ways. And the most gifted people can wind up pushing themselves through the most twisted path. And so I think, as Jim said, most of the people who read this book wind up kind of hoping that somehow or another there'll be redemption for the assassin. Because you understand what happens. And I think it's important, it's a very important point. You may try to turn your opponent into a cartoon in the public for public consumption, but if you're in a fight to the death that affects our country, you want somebody in the White House who knows everything about that person, every good and bad thing, and every strength as well as every weakness. And you'll see that in this. I mean, this is a very deliberate thing we did. And heck, I wound up liking her.
I think Mary would be a good vice president or chief of staff too,
She'd be a really good...
I've got all my parts picked out. I'll give you the list after tonight.
Assassin?
She's tending to her book club, but I think so too.
I'm a little old for the assassin. Was it fun mentally going back into the White House and creating specific, I remember you talk about the wallpaper in the dining room, and I know that I remember that was, Jackie Kennedy loved that wallpaper, and I'm not sure how it comes up and goes down, it must be on panels, but I know that, I guess all the little bits of the White House are from your memory and things you're fond of, right?
Yeah, and
sometimes I would write or rewrite a chapter, and then I'd get a half an hour on the wallpaper.
Well, I did have a consultant nearby to jog my memory. And so if I couldn't remember something, I'd ask Hillary. And if she couldn't remember something, I'd ask Chelsea. And if they couldn't remember something, then I'd go find somebody who could. But it was amazing. We tried to give people the feel for what living there is like, and also what physically moving to disappear would be like, and what the most likely way to do that is. It's not as easy as it sounds.
Are there truly tunnels underneath the White House?
What?
There are tunnels underneath?
Oh, yeah. And there are, and there have been for some time. But since one of the things that I had to do, because, I hadn't been there in a long time, I mean, I haven't been in office in a long time. So after 2001, the tunnel network under the White House was strengthened, made more sophisticated, and the rooms made more livable. Dick Cheney actually spent quite a lot of time under there for a while until the worst of the danger passed. So, you know, we had to upgrade what we knew about that.
That was fun. I enjoyed that. What do you think your strengths and your weaknesses were in doing this for the first time? And were you scared? What were your strengths and your weaknesses in doing this for the first time? And was it scary before you got started?
The book?
Yeah, to do this with such a great writer.
Well, I'm a reasonably good storyteller.
True.
So the president is a former Southern governor who was in the first Gulf War and was tortured as a POW. And that was their suggestion. Jim, I mean, when he talked to me, he said we should do this. And I said, well, okay, then we got to keep his voice authentic. And so he's fighting an illness, and he's grieving his wife, and he's got a grown daughter, and he's terrified something's going to happen to her. And you want to think he's big-hearted, but he's still got to run the show here. I mean, the country's about to go to hell in a handbasket. So my job was to try to, A, make the thing accurate and believable and possible, and C, I really tried to hear his voice. The books of Jim's that I like most are the ones I can hear the voices of the characters talking to me. And the voices sound real. I say, I know that person. Or I want to know that person, or that's real.
If you want to know what it's like to be president, this is a really terrific way to do it. Even more than a lot of the memoirs, because when a president, after the president read the memoirs, they really can't talk about everything. A lot of it's classified. There's certain things they can't talk about for whatever reasons. In this book, because it's all theoretical and fiction, we really could lay out what it would be like, how dangerous the job is, how difficult the job is. And I think that's something that really separates it. And we've heard that from almost all the reviewers, and there were a lot of authors quoted, read the book and went back to us, and they're just stunned by the authenticity of it, which is unusual.
And I think you get a real sense of the loneliness of that decision making, that ultimately it is just one person that has to make that final decision. And in this book, almost all the decisions are very, there is almost sometimes no good answer to what's in front of the president. And I just felt gripped by that. It's very intense to be inside that.
It is, but I think the other thing I'd like people to know is you do hire somebody to make the final call, and that's necessary. But one of the things we really tried to do was to give you a feel for how National Security Council decisions would be made, national security decisions, and how other kinds of decisions are made, and how important it is who your major players are in the White House staff and the cabinet, and how important it is for the president to be advised by people who know things that he doesn't, have skills that he doesn't have, and also have, in this case, some distance from the personal heat the poor boy is taking because he doesn't trust the Congress enough to tell him why he's not selling the country down the drain. So that, I hope that you'll both appreciate it's a lonely job and tough and everything, but if you notice, there's never a shortage of people that would like to have it. So I never felt too sympathetic with people who whined about how bad it was. They know where the door is. They can leave anytime they want. I mean, it's a tough job, and it is painfully lonely. And a lot of times you think the way you're treated is not close to on the level, but it's the most wonderful responsibility in the world.
I think that one of the things we both agree about in terms of leaders is that it's really important that they can put good people around them, that they have really good advisors, that they listen to those advisors, and then ultimately they make the decision. It's not like, let's all take a vote. It's, please, I want all the advice I can get. I want to hear it all. I want you to tell me if you think I'm full of it. And then the leader has to go make the decision, I think.
Yeah, I hope you'll all notice that one of my favorite characters we don't have time in the book to do a lot with because there's no time for politics is his political advisor. But she's great. She's salty and, she doesn't want him to do anything that sticks his neck out. She just wants him to stick it to other people, which is exactly her job. But
was she based on anybody in particular?
What?
Was she based on anyone in particular?
no,
Careful of lawsuits here.
no. But the thing that we did with this character, if you look all the way to the end of the book, even when the going gets tough and the weeds are thick, he's always listening to other people. Yes, he makes the final call, but he's never deaf to the possibility that other people may know something he doesn't know. And he also has to listen because whatever decision he makes, somebody else has got to go implement it. Don't forget that too. That's a big deal. It's a terrible mistake never to ask anybody's opinion and then to tell them what to do and realize if they don't do what you ask them, you're totally hosed. So it's much better to create a collegial atmosphere.
There's a speech near the end of the book, and I think when people read it, they'll go, well, this is pretty much what Bill Clinton thinks and feels. But to me, the most important thing is at the end of the speech, the president in the book says, this is what I believe, but I understand that there are other people on the other side that have another point of view, and we need to hear that point of view, and then we need to somehow meet in the middle. We need to figure something out, and compromise has become this dirty word, and I don't get it. We compromise in our lives. We compromise with our spouses. We compromise with our kids. We compromise at work. That's how life goes. And all of a sudden, that's become a dirty word. That's like crazy. It's crazy. I think it is. Right.
Yeah. I think by the end of the book, you will have you'll have some sympathy for almost. The operative word is almost. All the characters in this book. Our empathy, you will feel the ones that are on the level that are doing what they think is right. You will say, well, they probably could work it out if they'd all get off their high horses and go to work.
If somebody gets killed, you know that we ultimately didn't have any sympathy for that person.
That's not true. No, that's not, except the Secret Service.
Oh, that's true.
This book is, one of the subtexts of this book is it's kind of a love letter to the Secret Service. When I was very upset a few years ago when President Obama was in office, and I think Hillary was still Secretary of State, when Secret Service got some bad publicity for something that happened in Colombia or someplace. And they probably deserved a whipping on it, but the thing that struck me was, these people risked their lives for me. When Osama bin Laden ordered his crowd to try to take us out in either Pakistan or Bangladesh, and I had to take an unmarked plane in there, and I had to ask the Secret Service to give me agents without young children in case we didn't make it in or out. I'm a little more intolerant of just taking cheap shots at them than some people are. These people do a good job, and they put their lives on the line. And Jim and our sports nuts, we've been overdosing. We've had basketball and hockey and everything, but they're sort of like outfielders in baseball. Most of the time, the ball's not going to come at them. But they have to be paying attention 100% of the time. Because if the ball comes at them and they drop it, the whole game can be gone in one play. And that, it's really, so we try to tell you how this feels from the point of view of the Secret Service, and why the head of his detail, the president, thinks he has gone stark raving crazy to want to go missing.
There's actually a very beautiful acknowledgement in the book to the men and women of the United States Secret Service and all others in law enforcement, the military, intelligence, and diplomacy who devote their lives to keeping the rest of us safe and secure. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think somehow we have to figure out a way to stop taking cheap shots. I don't know how we're going to do that, the way the media is, but somehow it's just not. It's not useful. It's not the way it should be.
The book felt, well, I write music and I often write with other people, and people have said to me, well, did you do the music, or did you do the lyrics, or did you write the outline? And
you just say, yeah.
Yes, we don't differentiate, and I think one of the beautiful things about this book is that it does feel in many ways like one person wrote it, because it feels so true throughout it. I will say that there were a couple of places that I recognized my friend's voice, and you may tell me this was you.
See if you're going to get it right, Mary.
This might be you, but things like, that boy is so dumb he couldn't pour piss out of a boot if the directions were on the bottom.
That's the way they used to talk in Newburgh.
Actually, I think he wrote that.
No way.
I do. I think he
really?
did.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but only because I was
too. For one, go ahead.
Sounds like him though, right? No. I think one of the things that's remarkable about it is that it really does feel, what you did feels like one great writer. So I compliment you on that. I thought it was magnificent.
We actually had a lot of fun doing it. And we just, everything, all the pages went back and forth and back and forth. And we were trying to make it whole and exciting. And it's hard to, really, this is like Jim said at the beginning, the most important thing about this for us is, could you do something that would be a real successful thriller that's about something that's also real, that, so after people put it down, they're excited, but they also say, they're right, we got to do more about this cybersecurity thing. Just too many things that could happen that we're not properly prepared for. That's my goal here. And I want you to have a good time.
Well, and I think this is my last question because we're almost time's up here, but you're two guys who write with number 2 pencils longhand, and you're writing about cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's laughable.
That's...
So I'm guessing you had quite a good team to talk to, because it felt very real. And there's a particular character named Augie that is brilliant at what he does. And I just wondered...
He writes with a pencil too, Augie.
I don't think so. So how was that one of the biggest challenges, to get the cyber part of it right?
Well, when we started, Jim sort of presented an outline, and I suggested something back, and we finally got to where we agreed on the outline. Then he said, okay, if this is our outline, here are 20 things you've got to, we need to have this now before we can go forward. That's how we started. We knew that, I don't want to say too much about it, but Augie is central to why the president goes missing. But in addition to basically the best cyber attackers in the world are the Russians, the Chinese, and some people they hire for the purpose of supporting them. A lot of the people the Russians hire for the purpose of supporting them come from Central and Eastern Europe and around there. So the best cyber defense, among the best, is Israel and the Germans, because they've been assaulted by the Russians in their political systems too. And they make appearances in the book. But yes, Augie he's a very important part of this, and it's important for all of you to understand that even though we try to make him a kind of interesting character on his own, he is by no means on his own. There are a lot of people like Augie out there who are making a living doing this, sometimes for us. But it's a rough world out there, I'm telling you. You know that there's a hackers convention in Las Vegas every year. Did you know that? The past governor of Virginia, McAuliffe, took his voting machine to the hackers convention in Las Vegas, and it took them 6 minutes to hack it. And they said they had a couple more minutes, they could recalculate every election in ways that you wouldn't be able to prove anything he'd done anything. I mean, now the thing that bothers me, and Jim hadn't said anything about this, but we talked about this. And this relates to Augie too, because of what we don't yet know about the Russians. If you go from one county to another in Arkansas or one neighborhood to another in Little Rock, most people, the level of concern on what the Russians did in the election may be purely a function of who they voted for. You know, they voted for President Trump. They're probably glad the Russians did it, and they were glad to have all the help they could. They still came up nearly 3 million votes short, but it was enough in the way they did it. And but look, and if you supported Hillary, you probably think it's a terrible thing. The purpose of this book is to tell you that would be fine, but this doesn't stop at politics, it starts at politics. Keep in mind, both the Russians and the Chinese hacked both the Defense Department and the State Department and elements of our intelligence computers. Just in the last few years. The grid, if I say that to somebody who knows, they say, yes, but we have backup systems. Yeah, but you can take them out. And while they're taken out, what would you do if you could fry all the transformers? How long can we go without electricity before a large number of unintended consequences? I mean, this is serious. I want, so please don't see this through a partisan political lens. I wish, no matter what your politics, you could see that it was a horrible thing what Putin did to our political system, but it doesn't matter because it's a tip of the iceberg. It's just a tiny bit of what can happen to us.
We had a lot of help with the cyber terrorism, and really some of the best people in the country helping us to get it right. But one of the odd things was one of the reviewers from a major newspaper said that we were amateurs, we didn't know what we were talking about. And I always wondered, like, who the hell was she talking to? I know we had terrific people, and she's like, oh, they got it all wrong. Going,
we
really?
cite some of them in the book. We try to credit them.
Yeah.
But I called Richard Clark, who was in my counterterrorism unit and written several books, including using this device, the Thriller, to tell you about a lot of this. And he came to our event the other night, and he was one of the first people in the White House when I signed the executive order on cybersecurity in 1997. So I said, well, Dick, how'd we do? He said, it's good. I said, is the technology right? Did we get the technical stuff right? Yep. Will most people be able to understand it? Yes. And is it true that everything we say could happen can happen? He looked at me and he said, absolutely. And this is a guy that spent his life doing this. So we tried to give you a straight sell so you would be in a position to evaluate whether you think we should do more on it.
Well, if you guys can, if it does really well and you can afford it, I think you guys should send a copy to every member of Congress on both sides of the aisle. And I thank you so much
Thank you, Mary.
for being here. We love that you're here. Thank you.
This was the experience of a lifetime, and I want to thank you, my friend, for doing this, and I want to thank Jim Patterson for proving that you can still teach an old dog a new trick. It was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
This one last thing, he said something about my foundation. You need to know, nobody in America that I'm aware of has given away more books to more kids to learn to read. And he's the only person I know that in addition to doing that, he's supporting a big reading project for school kids with the University of Florida, and he actually gives money to employees of independent bookstores to supplement the salaries of people running these bookstores so they can stay open. So I'm proud of him.
Mr. President.
Thank you.
James Patterson, Mary Steenburgen. Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you you all can't imagine this magnificent crowd here. This is fantastic. I want to thank the Kumpuris family and Catherine M. When we first had that conversation with you, Dean, Drew, and I talking about this has exceeded all our expectations, and I thank you all very much for setting this series up. I want to also thank the Clinton Foundation, Stephanie, Bruce, YJ, Ben, thank you all very much. I want to thank the Clinton School, Nikolai DePippa, and Patrick Newton, who has an accurate count of how many people were here. But ladies and gentlemen, the real heroes today's, besides this show, is the University UA Little Rock, formerly UALR, UA Little Rock, Janessa and Andrew Rogerson, Mia Phillips, and John Evans. This is a great facility, and everybody, this is Little Rock's team. Thank you all.